Finley to throw. Over the middle, intercepted. Wolfuk again. Wolfuk the other way at the 30, the 40. Wolfuk to midfield. Miles Wolfuk with the pick, the heels on the doorstep of an enormous victory. Williams is the running back next to Howe. Play action. Howe will now lob it down the near side. Newsom with a man all over him. Pins the ball against the back of the defender and brings it in. Heels can get a first down at the 3. Howe, pump fake to the right. Now he's going to run to the left. Howe at the 5, takes the shot. Pinballing off the chains for the touchdown. Howe showing the toughness for 6.
Cardinals down 4, 35-31. May has the shotgun snap. Pressure coming. Rolls to the right.
Goes to the end zone. Touchdown! Touchdown, Antoine Green! 16 seconds to go. No flag.
Snapping it off the 8-yard line. May pulls it, tries to roll it apart.
Now he's going to throw it and score! Throws it to Paytor in the end zone for the touchdown! May throws it left-handed. Was rolling out on the run and threw it left-handed. Nard fields it at the 26. Heading to the far side. Theo at the 35. Theo, he's at the 50. No, he's not. Yes, he is. Theo into the Cajun for a touchdown. Are you kidding me?
What's going on, guys? Welcome into another edition of the Heel Tough Vlog podcast. I know it's been a while, but we're back here on a Thursday night talking a little Tar Heel football. And of course, we had to wait until we got some updates on what was going on for this upcoming season. We have gotten them in consecutive days. Yesterday and the day before that, we got some updates about the opening kickoff. We also got yesterday a ton of information on what's going to be new inside of Kenan Stadium this year in the 100th year anniversary season of the stadium. So we're going to talk about that. We'll look back at spring practice really quickly, talk about each position group again in a little bit of a different way. We're not going to go nearly as in depth as we did with some of the other stuff, but we're still going to touch on that. We've got, thoughts on the process, the first episode, just some of our initial thoughts on that. And then we do have a couple of pro Tar Heel updates that we have to give you before we get out of here tonight. All of that. And also we are on watch. There's a chance that it is going to be a solo pod at some point here during this edition of the show, because there could be a basketball commitment that we will have that Josh will have to step away to write about. So you never know what's going to happen here on this edition of the podcast. So stick around for what should be an exciting one. But let's jump into it. Let's start with the news that we got first this week, and that was the start of the college football season beginning over in Ireland. This was expected. I don't think it was really any sort of shock that this game was kicking off at 12 p.m. I know the last handful of years it has. And so I think that was the expectation, that this was going to be the game that kicks off the college football season. And so for a second straight year, this is going to be in a big spotlight for Carolina. A little bit different than last year, not quite the same feel as that first Monday night against TCU. But at the same time, it's going to be a big game that's going to determine a lot for Carolina going into this upcoming season in terms of how things go. I mean, it really is going to set the tone when they take on TCU in Avia Stadium in Dublin, Ireland. A 5 p.m. kickoff over there, so it'll be middle of the afternoon. But, when it comes to this game, where it's set, and now, as we've gone throughout, the offseason a little bit here, where is your confidence level about this game? Is it as high as it's ever been? Is it as low as it's ever been? How are you feeling about this game now that it's officially set for the first game of the college football season?
I don't know if my confidence is any higher or any lower than it has been at any point in the offseason. I can just tell you how important this game is when you look at the history of what this matchup has produced for the winner of said game and the loser of said game. The team that has won this game, it's usually been a nice building block. For the loser, for whatever reason, that program that has lost this game, and we've now seen this game be played for a handful of years now, it's kind of been a sign of things to come. So with that being said, it feels like it's going to be a massive game early for Carolina. You don't play in week 1 because you come back and you get the next week off, and I think we'd feel a lot better if we're sitting around the Labor Day weekend already being 1-0 with a win over a signature opponent like TCU, a team that blew you out in your building just last season. But that's just how I look at it. And I know that we have a coach that takes everything day by day, rep by rep, minute by minute, but the message should be very loud and clear to his team what this game offers, what this game represents. First off, this is a program that came into your building last year and embarrassed you. And they had a reason to run the score up on you because they were the forgotten about program playing in that game, despite having played for the national championship, just 3 years prior to that. But so you have that. You would want to get some revenge on what they did. And then just the fact that this could really set the tone for Carolina to be competitive. And if we want to be honest, if there's a path for them making a bowl game, it starts right here. Because, I don't know if they're going to be able to beat the Clemson, if they're going to be able to beat a Notre Dame. You got to play Miami. You've got some games that are a lot more easy to write losses on their schedule this year as opposed to last year. You get a win like this, maybe some of those swing games you feel a lot more confident in. So I can tell you my excitement and anticipation is building just because we're sitting here on May 14th and I am ready for football season to get here. I don't know if I'm any more confident that Carolina can win the game than I felt the last time we talked, but I can stress to you that this game I do think will set the tone for what could be a bounce-back season for Carolina football in 2026 or more of the same what we saw last year in Belichick's first season.
Well, I mean, look, there's no lie that whoever's lost this game has just completely fallen apart the last few seasons. I mean, yeah, there was a couple of teams that were able to scrap back that lost this game and end up making a bowl game, but it's pretty difficult to do. And with Carolina's schedule, yeah, it's going to be a challenge if Carolina loses this opening game. I would say that yes, I am as confident as I have been in this squad being able to win that game. Now, does that mean that if I predicted it today that I would say, yes, Carolina is going to win this game? I don't know. I'd have to think about that a little bit more. I'd have to read a little bit more about TCU. We're not at that point just yet, but just judging off of Carolina and where it seems like they're at, it feels like they're in a much better spot now than they were prior to the spring in terms. I mean, the thing was, we just did not know what to expect from this team going into the spring. We thought, yeah, there was a chance that some guys would be able to step up. There were a chance that certain freshmen would be able to show out, but we really needed to actually hear that coming out of the program. And I think you're hearing the things that you want to hear in terms of the communications better. It seems like this is a team that is bonding a little bit better than the team a year ago. And that's to be expected. There were a lot of guys that came in last year, of course, out of the spring transfer window, joined the team in the fall, and they became key parts of what Carolina did. So that was incredibly difficult for Carolina to have to go through that. You would expect that those things are going to be better this year. The other reason why I just feel better about this is one of the things that we've heard coming out of spring practice is that the offense is ahead of the defense. And you may say, well, doesn't that give you concern about the defense? Yes, I do think there is an element of that, but I think that it's really more speaking to the offense being much better under Bobby Petrino. And that's the reason why I feel like it's okay to sit down right now and say, at this point in the offseason, this is the most confident that I've been in terms of the Tar Heels winning that opening game. This is the most confident I've been in this team, going into the season, that I've been, since, last offseason, where I think some people were looking at this year and thinking, it's probably going to be proven by some of the season ticket sales. There weren't a lot of people that were believing in this group. And so it'll be interesting to see as we get closer and closer to the kickoff of the opening game. Do we start to, get more information that points us in the direction that Carolina is going to be, better than maybe we expect? I think that's going to determine just how confident we are going into that first game. All right, let's move on to the 100th year anniversary announcement for Kenan Stadium. Everything that goes into that. I mean, look, there are a lot of different things that are going to be happening. First of all, commemorative logo for this season. They're going to have it on merchandise. You'll be able to purchase it. I know there will definitely be something that will be purchased for me, for this 100th anniversary season. So yes, I think that's going to be cool. I'm not sure if they're going to wear something on the uniforms. I'm not sure if that logo is going to be on there, but you would imagine that they will do justice to paying tribute to 100 years inside of Kenan Stadium. Most of the important thing is probably the upgrades to the stadium, what you're going to see on game day. There's upgrades to the video board, expanding. They're going to be a little bit bigger, not significantly bigger to where you're going to, I think, be able to recognize it immediately upon walking in. I mean, look, as New York Met fans, we know when they went from their previous scoreboard or video board to their new video board, it was a massive difference. I don't think you should expect something like that where you're going to be just absolutely blown away going into game day. But I do think that it is going to be, much better screens that they're going to have there. It'll be a much better game day experience, watching some of the replays and stuff like that, as opposed to what we've had over the last handful of years. They're also going to have 9 new LED ribbons around the stadium. We know they've had some ribbon stuff around the stadium in terms of the video boards for the last handful of years. The thing that they're saying is that there are going to be more stats that are going to run throughout the game. So you'll be a little more updated on what exactly is going on inside the stadium instead of having to look at your phone. Which, if anybody knows, being inside Kenan Stadium, not easy. It doesn't matter. The internet connection inside of Kenan, not great. Unfortunately, nothing on that. And then you have the sound system. Now, the one thing that I will say about this is that I like that they're getting a new sound system. They've had some issues with it over the years. We remember that a few years ago. I just hope that it's not quite what you get in some of these NFL stadiums where it is impossible to talk to people during games. Now, you will have moments where the band's playing, and that's going to make it different where, as opposed to an NFL game where they're just blaring music during every break that they have. But I do think, hey, let there be moments where people in the stands are able to talk to each other. That's part of the reason that we go to games is because we love chatting back and forth about what's going on in the game. So I think that's something that is nice, but yeah, I think they need to be cautious with how exactly they use it. Then you've got renovations to the press box, ton of new stuff that's going to be in there. I was in the press box. It's been a while now. But yes, even during that time, I thought they definitely needed some updating in there. There's going to be some new murals that they're going to put on the wall paying tribute to Tar Heel football history, which I think is going to be very cool. So hopefully that'll be something that we'll be able to tell you guys about firsthand this year as hopefully credentialed members of the media for football. Now you get to the two things that I think most people probably want to talk about. The return of the Chapel Hill concert series. I think that certainly is going to be one thing that's going to be very exciting for a lot of people. Hopefully there are more games that are later in the afternoon. You don't necessarily have to get up and go to a concert at 10 a.m., but that will be returning. They are going to announce the lineup here soon. And then ultimately what we got to talk about here tonight, which is the throwback uniforms that Carolina is going to be wearing this season. Remember, they sort of teased us a little bit last year in the offseason that, hey, they were potentially thinking about bringing something like that out. Bill Belichick wore the UNC logo, and now that helmet, they have basically said that will be worn at some point this season. The belief is that there is a uniform that's going to go with it as well. They did say that they're throwback uniforms, so that would make me believe that they are going to have uniforms that resemble the 1980s team because they're going to pay tribute to them. And why wouldn't you? They're the last team in Carolina football history to win the ACC championship. So that'll be really cool. I think that's the most exciting part for me. Some nice upgrades to the game day stuff, but not anything groundbreaking that we should be overly excited about. Like, let's say internet connection being better inside of Kenan Stadium, or updated bathrooms, which is something that was very popular on social media last night.
Yeah, there's still ways to go, I think, to really get the fan experience where fans want it. But this is a very good step in the right direction, something that's been needed. The video boards have been, by current video board standards, probably outdated for a handful of years. You update those, you upgrade those, you enhance your sound system that does enhance your game day environment. And I do think this has been something in the Belichick era that they've really committed to as much as they've done at any point in time during our fandom, which is trying to elevate the game day experience, trying to, really get us ready for what I think is a potential move to the SEC later on this decade in the Big Ten or a Big Ten. Those are two football conferences where football culture is ingrained to how you spend your Saturdays on whatever campus or university that you support and you represent. So those will be a nice touch. It'll be very nice to see, what those look like and how they go about displaying that. Of course, we've got the light show. That's been a cool feature that they've been able to add when Carolina does host night games. The most important thing is we have a big decision to make about what we're doing with the basketball arena. And that feels like that's been the facility topic of talk for at least the last 18 months. I was really interested to see what Carolina was going to do with the 100-year anniversary of the stadium. And look, in the college football landscape, is Kenan Stadium one of the first stadiums that get mentioned when you talk about the great venues? You're going to hear Michigan Stadium, you're going to hear Notre Dame Stadium, Ohio Stadium, virtually every stadium in the SEC. This is maybe, for my money, as underrated a setting as there is in college football. It's as picturesque a setting as there is in college football with the way that the trees kind of engulf where it is. You've got the football in the forest theme. That's what Lee Pace wrote the book about. That I have and sits on my Carolina shelf. This is, if Carolina football was maybe the program that we dream of it being, I think it would be a lot more renowned for how unique, how cool, and how beautiful of a stadium as it is. And it doesn't appear that they missed the mark going all out to make sure that this venue gets honored the way that it should be honored. We've spent more Saturdays in that stadium than we've spent random weeknights or Saturdays in the Smith Center. There's a lot of my memories as a Carolina fan, not just Carolina basketball, but as a Carolina fan that's come in that stadium. It's something that means a lot to me. My favorite birthday gift was being in that stadium when Buck Howard caught the touchdown to beat Pittsburgh. A lot of memories have been built there over the last 10 years. And so, when you read the press release, you were reading quotes from Steve Newmark, not Bubba Cunningham. This was probably one of his first real big projects as he gets prepared to become the AD. And I think they're doing right. The merchandise, I'll buy as much of it as I can. Like I'm here for it. You want to sell t-shirts, polos, stickers, the list goes on and on. I'm going to eat all that up. The uniform is maybe a year late, but it's still better than not having the option of us getting to see Carolina bring back that logo, which I would love to see the university use as a lot more in totality. And that uniform is beautiful. That uniform, for a lot of Carolina fans that are maybe 2 generations older than us, that's their uniform they grew up watching this program play in, compete in. And oh, by the way, the last time this program won an ACC championship. So it might be a sad state of affairs, Of all the news and information we've gotten about this program since we last were on here recording, the stuff that came out about Kenan Stadium got me the most excited and really made me the most happy. I love that stadium. That stadium means a lot to me. And I'm glad to see Carolina honoring it in the way that it is. You had some more upgrades, which will enhance the fan experience. You're bringing back a uniform that has a lot of history and tradition to the program as well. It quite simply might be the biggest offseason win this program has gotten under Bill Belichick. And it could be something that at least has some feel-good vibes as we kind of get ready with talking season right around the corner and we get ready for not spring practice, fall camp to open later this summer.
Yes. Spring practice did happen. Believe it or not, it did. Yeah, I mean, I think not that you were dying for a win, but yeah, I think this was an easy layup, man. And announcing this type of stuff, I think is really special. One other thing that I didn't mention in there is the way that they're going to honor former players going to be a little bit different this year. And I think that's going to be really cool too. That is one thing that, look, you can criticize Bill Belichick for a lot, and we have on this podcast. You can't criticize him about how he's handled former players, at least from what we have seen. Now, you have the stuff with Marquise Williams, his tweet earlier in the offseason that got everybody stirred up and talking about what exactly is going on. And, who knows? I mean, that might just be one guy's experience. That could be a lot of guys' experiences. For the most part, it seems like a lot of guys that were here, especially those guys that are close to Lawrence Taylor and that group, seem to resonate very well with Bill Belichick. And I think it's going to be cool to see these guys not only be, honored at these games, but they're going to be a part of the old well walk. They're going to be a part of pregame stuff as honorary captains. That's stuff that you see other schools do that I think Carolina should lean into. Does Carolina have the most decorated football past of any school out there? No. But do they have enough history to be able to honor it in certain ways, in ways that other schools are able to do it? I think certainly. So, that'll be something that'll be really cool to monitor throughout the year. I'm definitely going all in on some of that merchandise that they have this year. I hope it's a patch that they put on a jersey that you could potentially purchase as well. That'd be really cool. So definitely something that we'll be monitoring throughout the year. All right, guys, let's move on to a little bit of talk about spring practice. We did have a request from one of our listeners who is a diehard listener to the show, was asking, can you guys do sort of what you did in the pre-spring practice edition of the podcast? Can you do a little bit of a updated version of that, where you guys are at in terms of confidence in the position groups for this upcoming season? And I thought to myself, look, we're not going to do the exact same thing. We're not going to give you the confidence level in each one of those. We're going to tell you, positions that we feel better about, positions that we feel worse about, and really positions that we feel the same about. And believe it or not, there's been a lot of negativity this offseason. It certainly hasn't been the most exciting offseason that you could possibly have. But when I look at this, I think that you do have a pretty decent amount of positions that you feel better about. The biggest one to me is quarterback. I think that's the one that I look at and I say, no doubt, I feel so much better now than I felt about that heading into the spring. I think a lot of that has to do with the fact that, what we've heard about Miles O'Neill, big arm. I think that certainly is something that gets you excited based off of what Carolina was dealing with last year. I think some of the talk about Billy Edwards Jr. maybe having the weaker of the arms in that quarterback room, I certainly think that's something, but at the same time might tell you more about the quarterback room as a whole being full of strong arms as opposed to Billy Edwards Jr. having a weak arm. And it seems like those are the two that have kind of separated themselves. The quote that sticks with me is, I think it was Jason Staples that said this. And I think there were some other people that reiterated this too in some of their takeaways. We're going to talk to Andrew Jones coming up here sometime next week. Be interested to talk to him about it. there is belief in the 5 quarterbacks that you have that were in spring this year that are scholarship guys, that all of them would have been better than what you had last season. Not just in the spring. We're talking about even in the fall when you had Gio Lopez. So I think just hearing that makes me feel like this is the room that I probably feel the best about, in terms of where I was prior to spring practice and where I am now. I think it's the biggest uptick is probably that room.
Well, because this is what happens when you, first off, when you do upgrade just the natural talent and ability in the room. And I do think in a lot of ways Carolina did that. You also hired an offensive coordinator that is QB savvy, that has made his name in the coaching profession, getting the most out of his quarterbacks. And his offenses through the years have adapted to what that quarterback skill set strengths are. Like if you go back and look at what Bobby Petrino did at Arkansas, and then you look at what he did at Louisville, 2 different offenses. That shows a coach that was able to adapt and play to his strengths. I don't think we'd feel that way if Freddie Kitchens was still coaching Carolina's offense. I don't know if Carolina maybe attracts some of the talent they got in the portal. If Freddie Kitchens was still Carolina's offensive coordinator. And make no mistake about it, if Carolina had this quarterback room this year, last year, Carolina does not go 4-8. I can't tell you if they post a winning record. I can be confident and tell you they make a bowl game. I do think there was maybe 2 more wins to be had there. And you look at this schedule this year that we all agree is tougher. Phil Steele, I think, ranks it the toughest schedule of any power conference team in college football. You got to have improved play at that position. So you got to love the fact that there's more talent in that room. I think you've got a legitimate competition to where they should push those guys throughout the fall camp on into the season where then iron sharpens iron and they get better with every single rep. You combine that with Bobby Petrino, who this is probably his last act in coaching, would maybe want to go out on some sort of high. Yeah, if this room is better, that I do think that does spell good things to come for Carolina football after we got spoiled watching, Sam Howell and Drake May play at an elite level for 5 years under Mac Brown.
Yeah, and it's not going to be that. I think if it's what Jacoby Criswell brought and, maybe even a little bit better than that, I think you should be satisfied, man, with this year's crew. And then you just kind of see where it goes from there, because I think Travis Burgess is a guy that's going to emerge at some point. Maybe not this season, but I think he's got a chance to be a really special player. I think Miles O'Neal has a chance to potentially be a really special player, especially if Bobby Petrino is going to stick around for a little while here in Chapel Hill. And so I think, that's the reason that you feel more comfortable because, we talked about it last year, man. You were trying to fit a square peg into a round hole, and it didn't work. And no matter what, it did not seem like Freddie Kitchens was a guy that was willing to adjust his offense to his quarterback. Bobby Petrino, that's one of the first things that he talked about when he took this job is we have to adjust to the group that we have here. I think he's done a good job of that so far, and we'll have to monitor how that goes as they go throughout the summer. This is always, we've talked about this so much, man. This is where Sam Howell won the job. Hell, this is probably where Drake May won the job. Player-led practices, the players will tell you who is the best quarterback out of this group. And then you've got the Taron Dickens element of it too. That's going to be really interesting to see when he gets sprinkled in there. What exactly does it look like? How do they divvy up the reps? I think that's certainly something that's going to be worth monitoring as we go over the next handful of months and get ready for the start of the upcoming season. But I feel good about that group. I feel a lot better about that group than I felt coming in. Tight end was a position I think I felt like Carolina got some talent. I think they definitely have taken a huge step there. A lot of people have been raving about that room. A lot of the sources around the program have been raving about the success of that room. And so I think, with Jelani Thurman, Jordan Washington there, Jackson Warren, Shamar Easter as a guy that's a holdover, and Carson Sneed, the true freshman, I think that'll be a position that we'll be talking about a lot here over the next handful of months as they get ready for fall camp and what to expect from that group. Another room that I think is really standing out, according to some other people, is linebacker. That was a room that we had some questions about. But Peyton Seelman, looks like he's going to be a big part of what Carolina does. Is he going to be a perfect player? Maybe not. There might be some bumps in the road for him as a guy that is going to have to go up from that FCS level to the Power 4 level. But it feels like there's a lot of people that love the instincts that he brings to the table, and that he's going to be a guy that's really going to stick out for Carolina, probably lead the team in tackles if he plays a significant amount of snaps for Carolina this season, which is the expectation right now. But then you've also got, hearing good things about Derek McDonald, looking the part, looking like the veteran that Carolina brought in, a guy that's played in the ACC before. That's huge for Carolina. And then also Jonathan Agamadu taking a step forward. That was a guy that was mentioned even before Peyton Seelman. So I don't know if he's going to be challenging for a starting role, but I think that certainly is very interesting to hear that. So, tight end, linebacker, I think two spots that we felt pretty decent about coming into spring practice. I feel now coming out of spring practice might be the two best units on the team.
Yeah, when you look at the linebacker room, I came across a clip from our good buddies over at the Tar Pit Pod, and they were talking a lot about, Jelani Thurman maybe being, I guess, a breakout candidate, a guy that could really emerge for this offense. And, this has probably been my biggest constant complaint about this program in the last handful of years, is maybe not maximizing that position the way that I thought the talent in that room should suggest. And I think for whichever quarterback does emerge in terms of being the starter, having that safety valve in that room, I think could prove to be really pivotal. When you're trying to, who's that guy on 3rd and 4? Teams are going to be looking to take away Jordan Shipp. Do you have that tight end guy that, gets that 6-yard route, gets you a first down? I'm fascinated to see how Petrino uses the collection of talent in that room, because I do think you'll have some sets where, maybe they're in 12 personnel, maybe 13 personnel. And they're trying to maybe use that for extra blockers in the run game, but also trying to utilize them in the pass game as well. And then linebacker, when you look at McDonald and Seelman, I think for McDonald, an experienced guy that knows this conference inside and out for what he's been able to do at Syracuse. We look at Seelman, and it's does the talent translate as he makes a step up in competition? I think we're looking at them and asking them to have the impact that we talked so much about Andrew Simpson and Kamori House having last year, where those were two guys that when they both committed, we felt really, really good about. And you go back to the first handful of games, they both flashed kind of individually, and then especially for Kamori House as the season moved along, just really was not the guy that we thought he was going to be after he transferred in from Washington. So that's kind of what I'm looking to see from those two guys, is can they maybe have the impact over the course of 12 games on the field with production, off the field and leadership that we talked so much about with the two big guys we brought in last year from the portal. And if that happens, combined with the defensive line group that I think is better than Carolina's defensive line was a year ago, I think we could be talking about a front seven that might be underrated, not just in the ACC, but in all of college football.
The last room that I wrote down about positions that you feel better about, I think wide receiver. I think there's still some questions as to who exactly is going to be that number 2 wide receiver opposite of Jordan Shipp on the outside. The other spots, you feel pretty confident that you've got guys. I mean, I think the slot, there's a lot of different guys that you could potentially rotate in there. But I think you feel like with the experience, you're going to find somebody that's going to be able to hold down that spot this season. I think with the second outside receiver spot, there was a question coming in, what exactly would Mason Humphrey look like? Would he be a guy that coming up from the FCS level would be able to stand out? And, it seems like, from some of the reporting that's coming out around spring practice, some of the, stuff that, the media was able to see, Jason Staples said it on Inside Carolina, that he believed that Mason Humphrey is probably the second receiver right now. But I do think there still is, room for improvement. He was a guy that was being coached very hard just about every time the media was out there. That was one guy that Garrick McGee was really focused on, trying to make better, trying to tell him exactly what he was doing wrong and where he needed to clean certain things up. So I think that's the guy they want to be wide receiver number 2. But then you've got, a guy like Nathan Leacock. Can he make a jump? Didn't really hear a lot about him, but I think that's the guy that you're keeping an eye on. The reason I feel more confident in this group, though, is because of the depth in this room. When you hear the stuff that you're hearing about a guy like Carnell Warren, who is a true freshman that looks like he's emerging, you're hearing that CJ Sadler in the slot is emerging to go along with Madrid Tucker and Shenard Clower, guys that Carolina used last season. Really, the thing that you have to look at with CJ Sadler is a lot of people talking about off the field, really just maturing there. But on the field, it seems like he's doing everything that he needs to do. Carnell Warren just seems to be one of those guys that's flashing. And so that's a name to keep an eye on as you move forward. I think depth-wise, that's probably where you feel pretty decent about that room. Then you get to the rooms that you're maybe a little more concerned about, feel worse about from where you were prior to the spring. To me, I only wrote down 2. There could possibly be a third here. We'll talk about that in the positions that you feel the same about. I think the biggest concern is what was written in Inside Carolina's recap of the scrimmage. I would imagine that Tar Heel 24/7 had something very similar. The defensive back room really struggled in that final scrimmage. They were picked apart at certain times. And look, it wasn't, hey, everybody was picked apart except Jaden Patterson. Everybody was picked apart except Caleb Cost. They just lumped the whole room together. And so this was a room that I felt decent about, really because of Jaden Patterson, Caleb Cost, who I think showed signs of getting better last season. I feel like, those are 2 guys that you're hoping that you can rely on. Biggest concern that's starting to pop up to me, though, even though Greg Smith is back there and there have been some people that have talked highly of him, it is the safeties in this room that right now have me concerned about this group as a whole.
Yeah, and it was a group that last year, with Will Hardy and others at times really, really struggled. And the safety position in 2026 football, maybe we don't talk about it with the same importance that we did a decade ago, but you don't see good defenses have bad safeties. Like, that may be a position that maybe doesn't get valued at the NFL level in terms of draft the way that maybe older football fans have seen it. But when you're still talking about the best defenses in college football, where you just want to be a competitive defense, you can't have poor safety play. It was something that doomed Carolina at times. You're good at that close-in game, and there were just so many mistakes in terms of angles, trying to make plays on the ball, tackling. The list goes on, that really highlighted the limitations in that room. This is, I'm not to disparage, right, what Inside Carolina is reporting, what Tar Heel 24/7 reported, but this is the downside of not being able to have our own eyes on what happened, because we can talk about them being picked apart, but if there was no pass rush, if there was never a consistent, pressure on the quarterback, then I wouldn't be surprised to see this defensive back room get, quote, picked apart as a whole. I think that's something that with this group, I think is going to be really, really important. I don't know if you have a guy on the roster that you, in terms of like being like a lockdown corner, that we felt about Thad Dixon before the injury. They're guys that you and I feel really, really good about and what they potentially can be. I think this is going to be a defensive back room that old cliche. Your back four is only as good as your front four. I think that they're going to go hand in hand. I think if Carolina's defensive line can get more consistent pressure on the quarterback, I think it'll make this defensive back room look a lot better. If they go into games and they're not getting pressure on the quarterback, I do feel like maybe this group does stand to give up a little bit more yardage than what we saw at times a year ago. Again, I'd have loved to have been able to be there for myself and be able to give my own opinions on them. I'll have to, just wait until we see this team play against TCU to form an actual opinion, unless, God forbid, we made it out to a fall camp practice. But I do think this is a room that there's talent there, there's potential there, but the production of that room is going to be really dependent on what the big guys up front do in terms of getting pressure on that quarterback.
Yeah, I think that's incredibly important. And the good news is that that's a room that I feel pretty much the same about, and I feel pretty good about that room. I don't think there's going to be much concern in terms of Carolina getting pressures. Are they going to have guys that are able to finish some of those pressures? I think that'll be interesting. But I feel pretty confident betting on the combination of Milcart, Abu-Jaude, who was really good a year ago. I think consistency is going to be the name of the game for him. I think he'll find that as the season goes along. I think especially being in the system for a year now, that will allow him to get to that point. And then, I trust that out of the combination of Donovan, Hoylett, and Jalen Harvey, you'll be able to find another pass rusher there, or combine the two of them and really be able to put together enough pressures to make it work. The defensive back room, though, we saw it last year. There were still moments where, Carolina was getting pressure, but they were still letting up big plays that would really hurt this defense, would allow teams to stay on the field on third down. You need this room to be better than they were a year ago. And, I like Jaden Patterson. I think he's a guy that, we probably feel pretty good about. Maybe we'll see, something that tells us a little bit different when we, turn on that first game against TCU in Ireland. Maybe, we get a look at him, as you said, in a fall practice and feel differently. But I feel like he's a guy that you can trust going into the season. Greg Smith, I feel good about, in terms of just the projection of what he can be at that safety position. And then Caleb Cost, I feel better about, but it's still going to allow some yards because it's the slot position. It's difficult to play that position and not allow yards. Where I'm really starting to get concerned is corner opposite of Jaden Patterson. Again, the last that we heard, D. Willie is the guy that they think is probably going to start out there if the season began today. I hope there's somebody else that emerges out there because we've seen the track record for D. Willie. It's very similar to Marcus Allen's track record. That's something that we would like to get away from if possible, because it's so hit and miss. It's allowing big plays consecutively. This dude allowed over 500 yards receiving the year that he played corner. That's a lot, man. That's a lot for an outside corner. So I would like to avoid that if possible, but somebody else has to step up. And then Coleman Bryson, it's the same thing. It's a position that, I am shaking in my boots about because I don't want that guy out there playing a starting role. He could be a guy that comes in and rotates in and I'd feel comfortable, but I'd like for someone else to emerge there. Maybe a guy like Jacob Witherspoon, a true freshman with more time in the system, maybe develops to that point where they say, you know what, we'll throw him in there. Maybe there's somebody else that finds a way to the forefront. Peyton Waters is definitely a guy that we saw a little bit last year, but at one point was dealing with an illness. Didn't really see him after that. So maybe that's somebody that sort of crops back up again. That'll be interesting to monitor that position. But yeah, that position is one that, I think right now you should probably feel a little bit worse about than you felt coming into spring practice. And then, the defensive tackle room. Now, the thing that I want to say here is I don't think you should be feeling like it is dire, like Carolina is not going to have the depth at this position. But I think when you hear that Carolina's there build-wise, Carolina's not there technique-wise behind Leroy Jackson and Isaiah Johnson. When you hear that, it's not the greatest thing that you want to hear. And again, this is really where a position where a lot of this is on the shoulders of true freshmen. You're talking about Viliami Moala, you're talking about Trayshawn Ruffin, and you're talking about Vodney Cleveland. Those are guys that are going to have to step up, and it just doesn't seem like they were talked about that much here in the spring. To me, that's a position room that I feel a little bit worse about, but not really by that much, because I still think you do have two really strong players there. It's just I'm worrying if that depth is going to be there.
Yeah, and I think the thing you brought up is the biggest concern is that they may be relying on freshmen to fill that void. And I don't want to take away from, the freshmen that they added. I mean, I don't do the recruiting nowhere near as much as you do, but I know how impactful some of these guys were. You just don't see more often than not, unless you got a one-on-one dude. You don't see freshmen impact at the defensive line spot that often in college football. That's a position where it usually takes their sophomore year. They need a full season in the program, get their body right before they really become big-time contributors. But if this was something that was emerging early in spring, maybe this allows this coaching staff to coach them up, and you can get more out of the collective whole than maybe you initially thought going in. I think it's going to be really interesting to see just what happens across the defensive line as a whole. You've got, Melcar Abujanade, who was your ACC sack leader, back. What's the one thing we've challenged on? We need that production to be consistent across the board. The sacks came in bunches. Leroy Jackson, we'll talk about him here in just a minute. I think what you like about him, emerging as a vocal voice among that defensive line, a leader that Carolina is going to count, that they're going to count on. I think you look at a guy like Isaiah Johnson. We talked about him back in the spring, or I guess the pre-spring. That's a guy that had moments, but can you build? And I think that's the thing is the guys that are back from last year, they had moments. They had building blocks. How much do you build? How much did they build off of that in the offseason? Are they ready to be consistent producers, on a down in, down out basis? If not, we saw that, Belichick, Lombardi, they prioritize defensive line in this recruiting class with some of their high-end recruits coming from that position. They may turn to them. I just would warn you that you don't really see a lot of production out of freshmen at that position. We've seen it in the past when Carolina has recruited big-time players at that D tackle spot. Travis Shaw comes to mind, but maybe with their scheme, they're poised to benefit. But I think this is a group that I think if you look at this roster and you look at last year's roster, I would think maybe there is more depth on there in some form or fashion. You just need to see it translate onto the field. And if it does, I think that spells good things to come for the back seven.
Yeah, I think with this group of defensive tackles, it will happen where they are going to be maybe they're not better than last year's group. CJ Mims, DeAndre Robinson, big parts of what Carolina did. I thought out of all the position groups that we talked about throughout last season, the defensive tackle group was as good as just about any on the roster. I mean, they were consistently making plays in the run game for most of the year. They got worn down as the season went along, but I think for the most part, when they were on, and they were really good. I think this group can get there. But my concern is the start of the season, what it's going to look like. Will teams be able to run on you? Because when you rotate in a guy like Vodney Cleveland, a guy like Viliami Moala, they're not there technique-wise. They can't shed the blocks, and it allows teams to be able to run through the middle on you. That's where I'm a little concerned. For me, I don't know how much we need these guys to be involved in the pass rush. You need a little bit. I mean, of course, you want interior pressure. Good news is that I think that the two best guys at providing interior pressure for you a year ago at times were the two guys that returned to your roster this year. I think Leroy Jackson had moments where he did a really good job of that, and I think Isaiah Johnson was definitely that guy at certain points during the season. So, yeah, I think those guys you feel really good about. You know they're going to be impactful, but how many reps can they play in these games early in the season? You're going to need them to play more than they played last year. There's going to be more on their plate than there was last year. So, I think it's just about how quickly can you get those defensive tackles up to speed. Once you do, I think you'll be in a pretty good spot. And I think there's just too much talent for those guys not to eventually get there. Out of that trio, and even David Jackson, haven't even talked about him. He's a guy that was talked about a couple of times. I've heard his name mentioned a few times here this offseason as a guy that's putting in work too. So that could be a guy that progresses. You have a litany of options amongst the true freshmen and even the redshirt freshmen. It's just about who steps up and how quickly. Positions that I feel the same about. We'll just kind of rapid fire this one right here. The most difficult one that I had trying to figure out where to put it was running back. I still feel like you probably feel about the same as you did coming into the spring. The only reason that I would say I was debating on putting it at feeling worse is because nobody emerged as that explosive playmaker. You guys that we hear that are going to be a part of this running back rotation are Damon June, straight line runner, Ben Hall, straight line runner from what we saw last season, and Caleb Jackson, another straight line runner. Guys that are going to do a lot of their damage inside the A and B gaps. You're still looking for that guy that's going to be able to get to the D gap consistently and really be able to set the edge, and control the edge for Carolina in the run game, create some of those explosive runs. I don't know if you've got that guy right now. It's going to be interesting to monitor that, see if that changes as we go throughout the fall. But I think that certainly is one position that I look at. I say I feel the same about it, and probably not the greatest thing that I feel the same about it. Offensive line, same thing. A room that I don't feel worse about because I didn't receive anything that told me that Carolina is worse off there than we believed. I don't feel better about the group because we haven't received anything that Carolina's shining in that area. Again, the lineup that we've seen or the front five that we've seen most often in terms of who would be the starting five if the season began today. Trey Blue at left tackle, Andrew Threet at left guard, center would be Christo Kelly, right guard would be Aiden Banfield, and right tackle would be Aiden Buchanan. Can't say that I'm overly confident in that group. Can't say that I think that's going to be the worst group in the ACC or anything like that. It's going to be one to monitor. Hopefully we get a little bit more on that group as we go throughout fall camp, because we didn't really get a whole lot about them during the spring. Edge rushers, feel the same about them, but it's in a much different light. That's a really good thing. I don't know how much more, unless you had Jalen Harvey just go absolutely crazy. Donovan Hoylett just looked like he took his game to a whole nother level. We didn't really hear much about either one of those guys. Still feel pretty good about them, though. Like I said, I feel really good about that edge rusher group. And then special teams, I have no idea how to feel about them. No clue. That was the one position group. We did not receive a single tidbit on the special teams unit. Now, that is because, as far as I know, during the the viewing periods that they had. They didn't do any sort of special teams drill, so you can't get a feel for where any of the kickers are at. Can't get a feel for where any of the punters are at. Didn't hear anything or didn't see anything from inside Carolina about where those guys were at during the scrimmage. So that is as big of a mystery as anything when it comes to this team. What do you think about that group right there? Mainly thoughts on, offensive line and the running back room.
Yeah, I was going to focus more on the running back position because with the offensive line, they could have told me they look like all 5 pro All-Americans. Until we see it, I ain't going to believe it.
Okay.
Yeah, so that's just where I'm at. Like this has been a group we have talked about. It feels like since the podcast was created. I think the podcast was created, we were complaining about the offensive line. Until the final days of this podcast, we very well could be complaining about the offensive line. You were mentioning the running back room and how there's not an explosive runner that emerged. I don't know if there's a guy on the roster that is what you're talking about. Like, I don't know if there's someone there that can be someone that can be that home run threat, that dynamic game changer. And I just wonder, like, did they not prioritize that, like, in terms of the portal, like going and getting a shifty back that you can just hand the football to, and he can, I saw the clip going viral or on social media this week of TJ Logan, a guy that, was a physical runner, but was a guy that could turn a 3-yard run into a 40-yard run and get into the end zone. There's something to be said about having grinders, and I do think that they'll be able to finish runs. And I do think, you're going to see some steps forward from what you saw out of that room a year ago. But when I think about Bobby Petrino's offense and you think about the zone running schemes and how much, they stress being able to get to the edge and then being able to turn up field, I don't know why they did not maybe prioritize bringing someone of that ilk in to where you hand him the ball, he gets off tackle, he gets to the second level, and it's good night, Irene. He's running all the way to the end zone. I think if Damon June gets to the second level, it's going to be a 10 to 12-yard carry. Is it going to be a game-changing carry? I don't know. So that's like the one thing I wonder about with that room is I think you like their ability to maybe be physical and wear down opponents. I don't know if they necessarily brought a runner in that can be that home run threat that we talked so much about. So maybe I'm wrong on that, but that was like the only comment I really had about that of the groups that we wrote down here that we feel the same about as we did going back in the start of spring practice 6 weeks ago.
Yeah, I would say that the reason they probably didn't bring in anybody at that position that was an explosive runner like that is, one, when they decided to bring in Caleb Jackson, I don't know if that guy was out there. Maybe there is a guy that, was still out there. Maybe he'll turn up at some other university and we'll say, why did they not go out and get him? The other reason why is I believe that they thought Jalen McGill was going to take a step this year. Jalen McGill, guy that came in last year, reclassified from the 2026 class. He's supposed to be a freshman this year. Maybe he's a guy that just needs more time, and maybe he develops into that guy. I mean, I watched him in high school or watched the high school tape of him, and there were some really nice moments where he looked like he could be an explosive player, where he looked like he could, run on the edge and really create some of those big time carries that Carolina's looking for out there. I don't know why that hasn't necessarily translated. And again, maybe it does, and we just aren't being told about it. Maybe they just haven't seen it. Maybe the sources in the program really aren't talking about it because they're focused on the other guys. But it's also possible that he's just not that guy at this level. You go back and watch Benjamin Hall's high school tape. I mean, he's a completely different player than what he is now. And so I think that could be the reason why they didn't go out and get anybody. But we'll see, man. I think that's one of those rooms where I want to stress this. I don't feel bad about that room. I feel like they've got good players in that room. Like, I think that, like, I really like Damon June. And I think that type of runner is something that you need in that room. It's when you've got so many different iterations of that guy, at least from what we've seen, that it makes you wonder how Carolina can, put together a running game that throws different things at teams. If you're running basically the same guy over and over again, you're just keeping them fresh. I mean, that's great. You might wear down teams through that. But yeah, I'd like a little more explosivity to the backfield. That's something that you got to see whether or not you're going to be able to get this season. But yeah, everything else, I think you feel, offensive line, as you said, we've been talking about that for years. The thing that I will say is that I don't know if I've ever felt this down about an offensive line coming into the year. It's not anything negative against the guys that are on this offensive line. Trey Blue didn't play last year. Aiden Buchanan basically didn't play last year. Aiden Banfield basically didn't play last year. Moving a position. They're going to move him to right guard. He originally was at left guard when he was playing previously. Andrew Threet, we don't know about him. He's a guy that I think you can read all the stats you want about him. We just don't ultimately know. And even Christo Kelly. I love Christo Kelly from what I've seen in the videos, the process, which we're about to talk for a little bit here about. Love him in that. He looks like a leader. He looks like exactly what you need. He's a guy coming up from the FCS playing Power 4 football. He didn't play much last year. So I have no idea what to believe with that unit. That's why I say I still feel the same about it, but we'll see going in. Hopefully that's the position I'm most surprised by, how much better they are than we think they're going to be. All right, quickly on the process, first episode. Again, I think this was kind of what we predicted that it was going to be. It really focuses, we saw it last year, focused on certain student athletes, guys that were expected to be leaders on the team. Really thought we saw that in this one. Jordan Shipp, man, dude, I tell you, I don't know if he's going to put up the stats that some of these other guys are going to put up or have put up in previous iterations of Tar Heel football and guys that I just really loved. But this is a guy that's up there just based off of the personality, based off of the leadership, and I mean, just the type of human that he is, man. How much it means to him to honor Tylee Craft every single day. Whenever he's working out in Tylee Craft gear. He's got Tylee Strong and his number tattooed on his body. And, he's a guy that every time that they are in practice and they show clips of them doing running drills, he was using the mantra that is tied to Tylee via Mitch Mason, which is keep swinging. And we saw that over and over and over again at the start of this episode. I thought that was really cool. Love Leroy Jackson. Leroy Jackson seems like a fun dude, man. Definitely the type of player that I think a lot of Tar Heel fans can get behind. I think he's one of those guys that, there are probably going to be people that are going to attack the fact that he said, look, I don't want to be football all the time, football overload to where I get burnt out. So one of the things that I do is I like cooking. I do like going out with my teammates and bowling. He's got a really unique bowling style, but it seems to be working for him too. But I love the personality, man. I think it's great. And he seems like a leader too, man. And, then there's Milcart, who just, he does things his own way, man. He's a quiet dude, but he's a guy that is going to demand from others that they follow in his footsteps and do the things that they need to do to be great. And so I thought this was a cool look into some of the leaders on this team. And the other thing that I took away was that just every one of these guys talked about player-led teams are going to be the most successful. Jordan Shipp really hammered that home. Same thing with Leroy Jackson, that if you are going to be a success, we have to be player-led. This year, it's going to be easier because we know everybody. That's what Leroy Jackson said. Last year, we went to spring practice with certain guys. We lost a decent amount of them and brought in other guys in the spring. This time around, it's different. And so I think those were the main takeaways that I had from it. Again, these are fluff pieces. These are not going to be anything in depth. They're not going to give you any sort of behind the scenes access. Talk to, Bobby Petrino about what his playbook looks like, nothing like that. But I thought a real cool look at the student athletes and how they go about their day-to-day stuff.
If you're a Tar Heel football fan that's sitting here on the fence and trying to figure out, like, why is a reason to go watch this team play? Jordan Shipp is worth you going and you supporting. Is he gonna have a career and make plays that you'll be telling your grandkids about, sometime down the future? I can't tell you if he's gonna be that level of impactful on the football field. I don't care about that. I care about the man that he is.
Mm-hmm.
And we talk so much about this where we want people that represent Carolina to thrive. Like, when Seth Trimble made the shot, Hubert Davis said that was the perfect guy because of what he did for Carolina basketball, the way he represented Carolina basketball. There's no one on this roster more deserving of that type of moment, of a breakout type of season than Jordan Shipp. I don't want to be hyperbolic. I don't know if we've seen a better representation, a better embodiment of what we want a Carolina football player to be on the field and off the field than Jordan Shipp. And, Mac Brown brought some great A dudes for the program and brought in guys that we'll be talking about for what they did on the field. I'll be telling my kids about Jordan Shipp off the field. And that to me means just as much as anything. And it's why, regardless of what the record is, I'm going to go watch the kid play in person, whether it's as a media member or if I got to buy a ticket and go as a fan, because he's earned that. He deserves my support because of the things that he's done outside of just making plays on Saturdays, keeping alive, the memory of Tylee Craft, Mitch Mason. That means more than wins and losses, man. Like you're talking about life impacting stuff. And so that to me is cool. I just thought it was, you got to remember it's team propaganda, but we need team propaganda because we don't get a lot of access to our program. We don't get a lot of access to this team. A lot of the stuff that gets said and gets reported usually isn't very positive as it is. So it made me forget for 20 minutes about all the crap. And that reminded us we do have good players. We do have good kids. And while I can be frustrated with maybe where we're at and maybe what we haven't done, I'm still going to cheer my ass off for Jordan Shipp, Leroy Jackson, Melcar Abujaneh. It's cool seeing these guys grow into their own as football players, as leaders. So I thought it was a good start to an episode, to the series. I think it was a three episode series. So no complaints over here for me. It was 20 minutes of content that had me feeding for more.
Yeah, I think I was skeptical going in. Not going to lie to you. I thought, why would you want to do this after what happened last year? It felt like some of the guys, based off of how much they were being covered, how much they were being talked about, that some of them may have had bigger heads going in the season than we thought they should have. I don't think this group's going to be like that. I think that they did a really good job of keying in on the leaders and showing guys that can handle this type of stuff, that are mature, and showed guys that are going to be very important to what Carolina does this year. So I commend them for it. I'm going to be interested to see the next two episodes that Carolina is putting out, and it's just modern day stuff. This is what it is. Everybody seems to do these types of things. Goal, about what it would be, because when we watch these things for NFL teams, we get insight into what the front office is doing. We get insight into some of the roster moves. I know it's not going to be like that with college. You're not going to show guys getting passed over. You're not going to show Michael Lombardi saying that, these guys aren't good enough to play for us or something like that. I didn't think that was what we were going to get, but I was pleasantly surprised with what we did get, and I think it was a really cool thing. If you guys haven't checked it out, go back, watch it. It's on the Carolina football YouTube page. It's on their Twitter page as well. Really cool 20-minute video that they put up there, and really looking forward to the rest of the series. Couple of quick notes on the way out here for you guys. Thaddeus Dixon, guy that's in the NFL for Carolina. This will be 2 NFL updates on these guys for former players. Thaddeus Dixon ruptures his Achilles. He is out for the upcoming season. Really sucks because that was a guy that, being someone that's a Giants fan, knows the makeup of that roster. I thought he had a really good chance to make that roster. I thought there was, or at least stick with the team in a practice squad role. Now, what'll probably end up happening, he won't get cut. I think he'll be someone they'll hold on to and try to get a look at next year and see if he fits ultimately what they want to do. But this season, a complete wash for him. Just sucks, especially after he dealt with a hamstring injury last year. They were saying that was the reason that he didn't end up getting drafted, which I find just ridiculous. I mean, he returned from that injury in the middle of the season. I get that he wasn't great, but at the same time, I think that shows that he was a warrior willing to get back out onto the field, and definitely seemed like he was playing at a pretty decent clip in terms of effort level. I don't think that was the issue for him. I do think that injury was something that was lingering a little bit, but maybe it was something that lingered into the pre-draft process, and it's ultimately part of the reason why he didn't get drafted. And then Smith Vilbert, the edge rusher from Carolina last year, he ends up signing a deal with the Minnesota Vikings following a strong showing in their rookie minicamp. Of course, last year, 22 total tackles, 6 tackles for loss, 1 sack, 21 total quarterback pressures, a forced fumble, 2 fumble recoveries, and 2 pass deflections. Solid for a guy that played the most snaps of his career a year ago. I think it was over 530, somewhere in that range. And, had his moments where he looked good. Do I think he's a guy that's going to stick around in the NFL for years to come? I don't know about that, but you never know. We've seen guys like this before. One name that always comes to mind, a guy that really just wasn't utilized the way that he was supposed to be at the college level. And then when he got to the NFL level, they found the perfect position for him, found the best fit for him was Jalen Dalton. That was a guy that lasted on practice squads for years. So maybe that's something Smith Vilbert is able to do. So that wraps it up for this edition of the podcast, guys. Make sure you head over to the website, heeltoughblog.com. A lot of updates on the 2027 recruiting class and the official visits that are coming up for that group. We're going to put up an article tonight about the tight ends. I'm going to let you in on a secret. There are no tight ends that are scheduled to visit in the summer. Just a little update on Mason Oglesby, who took his official visit back in April. I'll have that up for you guys. And then tomorrow we'll be hitting it real hard when it comes to the offensive line. We'll have the offensive tackles. That article should be up tomorrow evening. And then interior offensive line should be up on Saturday. Very, very lengthy group of guys that are going to be visiting at both of those spots. Offensive line, clearly a focus in this 2027 class, even though it is going to be a smaller class that Carolina is going to be bringing in. That's the main thing that we're covering right now on the website. If you want to go back, read the stuff about Kenan Stadium and the 100th year anniversary, go a little more in depth on some of the stuff that they're going to be doing, like the press box renovation, like some of the stuff they're doing inside the stadium. Go back, check that out on the website as well. And that's really what we're doing football-wise. Basketball-wise, it ain't slowing down, man. There is plenty of news that is coming out around Carolina basketball. Kevin Thomas ended up committing yesterday, a 4-star wing player. That's a guy that you should go back and read about if you haven't read about him yet, to get a feel for what exactly he's going to do. We do have a couple of staff hires, Brian Tabaldi coming on as a part of the staff, and then Brandon Robinson in some sort of role. I'm not sure if it's considered a full-on assistant role or what exactly it's going to be, but he is on the staff as well. Josh wrote about that, so you guys can go and check both of those articles out as well. And then some news that could be becoming official here soon on a member of the front court that Carolina is chasing after. So just keep an eye out for that. That's the hint that we'll give you. That'll be news that'll probably come down here within the next day or so. So keep an eye on the website at all times. Morning, afternoon, evening, best way to do it is to check those sites, and then follow us on social media, man. That's the other great way to do it. You know, the Facebook page, you guys have been going there for years. At Heel Tough Blog on Facebook, same thing over there on Twitter, just at Heel Tough Blog. That's probably the best place to get everything. Just hit that follow button, click on that notifications tab, turn on all notifications, because the only thing that we tweet off of that account, including retweets, is just our content. That's it. So make sure you guys are going and doing that. That's the way to keep up with all of the latest on Tar Heel football and Tar Heel basketball. So greatest place to get the opinions, guys. You know us. We're very, very opinionated. So make sure that you guys are doing that. Also, be able to go over, follow the Instagram pages. Heel Tough Blog, I'll put some stuff on there. I've been meaning to keep up with that, but we'll put some more stuff on there. And at the Four Corners, spell out 2021. That is the basketball one for you guys to check out. Also over there on TikTok. We're extremely into the social media stuff right now. So the number 4 Corners Podcast 2021. That'll take you to that page if you're over there on the talk. And I'm missing one. Oh, the email, the Four Corners 2021 at gmail.com if you want to message us on that side of things. Also, Heel Tough Blog at gmail.com if you want to send anything the Heel Tough Blog podcast way. So that wraps it up. That's it. That's all the stuff we got to promote for you guys. Appreciate you guys being here with us on a Thursday night. We want to thank you guys for watching and listening to this edition of the podcast. Thank Josh for hosting with me. And as always, go Tar Heels.